Good
Welcome.
morning. Good morning and good afternoon. And it's a real pleasure to be back at SCA after 11 years. I have been involved in the sales community and sales research and sales education for about 15 years, but I was chair of the business department when I had a day job from 2013 to 2020. So it took a bit of a backseat, but the line of research that I'm going to talk about today, I started with Dr. Claudia Misch at Purdue University Northwest back about 10 years ago. And it's been 11 years since I've been at SCA. And this is something that we've been kind of working away at. But when I stepped down as chair and decided not to stand again, we decided it was time to really get back into examining our stream of research in detail. And Claudia and I not only have that research interest in common, but we both teach in the Chicago area. I'm about 50 miles north of downtown Chicago. She's about 40 miles south in Calumet, Indiana. I'm in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And our institutions are very similar, probably about 50. They're both commuter schools. Over 50% of the students are first generation college. And we're kind of similar sized institutions. Purdue Northwest is a little larger. And then I was fortunate enough to meet Karen Piesker. I'm Canadian, Karen's a fellow Canadian. And as a lot of you know, she's done a tremendous job in building the first real certified sales program in Canada at Ryerson University, which is soon to be Metropolitan University of Toronto. And she's built that in a very short period of time. And Karen's also holds a doctorate from the UK as well. So there's some connections here as well. And she joined us for the 2 phases of the research. So what I'm going to talk about today, and if we can leave the questions to the end, and unless you've got any clarifications that are required through it, you can either use the Slido, which I just learned about this morning, or put them in the chat. But I think there's a lot of information here that you're going to want to that hopefully will be of value to you, because we heard the voices of about 250 recent grads over the last 2 years and what they thought about preparation through their college education for sales careers. And so I'll get right into it. So put that coffee down. I hope you got that reference. It wasn't an insult. That was regarding the first presentation. But we're going to talk about just briefly about the current state of sales education and the changes we've seen in the last 5 or 10 years. And then I'm not going to delve deep into the research, but we're going to talk about some key concepts, the relationship of sales knowledge that students attain, and also the concept of self-efficacy or confidence in their career choice and confidence related to sales. And also self-leadership, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and its relationship to self-efficacy. And all these factors, particularly self-efficacy, has been shown over the years through many research points to affect sales performance. And we're talking about sales performance in early stage salespeople and the intent to stay. And we'll see why that's important. So it's a 2-phase study that took place over 2 years. And we've been working away at the results. Phase 1 is already published. We've submitted phase 2, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So just the caveat that phase 2 has not been peer reviewed yet. And then I'll try to allow a lot of time for our takeaways and discussion as much as we can. So I'll go through the research very quickly. So the current state of sales education, obviously, as we've talked about, and we all know, there's a trend towards organizations value, or they're seeking salespeople that have current analytical skills or are fluent with technology, and they have the soft skills in terms of sales leadership. And so that notion of the past and some of what we saw in the movies of extensive personal interactions and schmoozing and contract signings, they're still a part of sales, but you need to be much more multidimensional today. And this trend's only been accelerated by COVID, as we can understand. We probably had about 5 years of technology advancement compressed into 2, just out of necessity, and a lot of those changes are still with us. So organizations are increasingly seeking trainable well-educated sales candidates that don't have that much experience that they can train in their methods. And I was shocked at some of the statistics. I hope this statistic is accurate, but I found a citation from the Bridge Group in 2018 that by 2018, even pre-COVID, 41% of business development reps hired had less than 1 year of prior experience, and that was for CSRs, for entry-level positions, versus 8%, only 8% in 2012. So you can see how the shift has occurred, where we're kind of in what they call a catbird seat, I guess, in terms of having the graduates that employers are seeking, and we all know that. And the Great Resignation, a lot of older salespeople who, really got a little overwhelmed, I guess, in some cases, or felt it was probably time to move on because of the new demands in technology that were placed because of COVID. So we have demand for our students, definitely, but they have to be ready to hit the ground running. And as we know, the growth in sales programs has been rapid. While undergraduate enrollment has been declining in the US every year for the last 10 years, the number of sales programs has been increasing dramatically. And for those of you that have been around for a while, even longer than I have, in sales education, which is since about 2008, the growth has been, tremendous. We can see the growth. In 2007, there were under 50 programs offering a professional sales designation. According to the SEF, there's nearly 200 today. That's still a drop in the bucket. There's 3,000 business schools in the US. And we've seen rapid growth in Europe as well. There's no question. And I learned from Karen and past experience and, through some of the US competitions, meeting those from European schools, that the growth has been definitely rapid, and there have been a number of pioneers in UK and elsewhere. And the thing that the UK has that I think we envy a bit or should envy in the US are more developed in apprenticeship programs or co-op programs. And I'm from Canada, and those are long established, where students will do a rotation between an employer, back to their studies, and then back to the employer. So we see many new, mature, well-developed programs. We're members of the University Sales Center Alliance, and for a while it seemed like every week we were announcing a new member. And obviously the requirements are a little more stringent. Those are typically reserved. The USCA members are typically those programs that are most developed. And as we all know, there have been a lot of sales competitions in the US that have sprung up over the last 5 years, but that should read, demand still exceeds supply. Every competition that opens up seems to book solid, within months of being announced. So industry is willing to support these competitions, and that's further evidence that should support our mission. And when we think of the importance of sales, probably close to $1 trillion, it's the largest line item expense for most organizations. Nearly $1 trillion is spent on sales forces each year. And the average first year turnover rate is 39%. 24% of that is involuntary, according to the Bridge Group, 15% is voluntary. So companies are hiring new grads and untrained grads, but the turnover rates are high. There's no question. And a lot of organizations, and our mandate should be to lower that turnover if we can. And a lot of research shows we pick on millennials a lot, and millennials are becoming kind of the more middle-aged as time goes along. So, they're the dominant part of the workforce. There's been research that shows that they generally have a higher intention to leave and less attachment to employers. So the good news is that the Sales Education Foundation, 30% lower turnover is a statistic that's been cited for years. There was a study done a number of years ago. Sales grads ramp up faster, they're more likely to say. But even at 30% lower turnover, that's still nearly 30%. And that's a substantial cost for organizations. So a couple of concepts, just some core concepts: sales knowledge, career choice, sales-related self-efficacy, self-leadership, and sales performance and intent to stay. So almost all sales programs, as we know, and we've talked about today, we do experiential exercises. We teach selling process skills, communication skills, to some extent, relationship building skills. But in a study that was done by Lisa Spiller and her colleagues in the Journal Marketing Education, I believe, less than half reported, less than half of programs in a survey of US sales programs taught career choice, 41.3%, career choice and development, how to seek out an employer, and about 31% or less than a third focused on personal or life or territory management skills. And career development research in sales accounts for only about 9.3% of sales education publications in the last 5 years, according to Lisa Spiller and her colleagues. So why is self-efficacy important? Obviously, salespeople are unique in that they're faced with rejection and long business cycles. And so they have to have a belief in their own ability, probably almost more than any other profession. Self-efficacy, which is basically the belief or that you're capable of performing a task, it's been shown to positively impact perseverance and performance, which are key in sales. It's been shown to do that repeatedly. But self-efficacy can also predict the level of effort people put into a task, how long they persist, which are both important in sales, obviously. Their interpretation of failure, what does it mean? Obviously, with better self-knowledge and better assurance, salespeople are able to look back and why things happen and not let that affect their emotions and correct the problem. And so high self-efficacy beliefs also affect individuals' behavior and their response to attributions of failure. Why did I fail? So overall, individuals with high levels of self-efficacy also tend to set higher goals and they show increased levels of performance. So more important than ever today is self-efficacy, I would argue, because companies need sales graduates, as we talked about, that can self-lead, that can adapt quickly and think creatively. We're in a much more complex environment than we were 10 or 20 years ago. Things are less routine, and these students are being onboarded into, as you can see, virtual situations with people that they've never met, and have to ramp up and experience mentorship in new ways that neither the mentor or sometimes the student is accustomed to. So we do a good job, and you're going to see in the results of the research today that sales programs are effective. But research in career readiness and self-leadership is shown a discrepancy between the perceptions of readiness amongst employers, educators, and students. So employers and students generally don't think we do as good a job as we do, which isn't surprising. So self-leadership, why it's important. It's defined, what is it? It's defined as a practice of intentionally influencing your feeling and actions towards your objectives. So it's kind of the idea of the 7 habits of highly effective people, Stephen Covey, is kind of identifying what your strengths and weaknesses are, having a sales knowledge, setting a plan, and ensuring that your behaviors, all your behaviors within the workplace, focus on that goal. And that's essentially the concept of leading yourself. And there's also been positive relationships between self-leadership, self-efficacy, and sales performance that have been found through a number of studies. And that's not surprising either, because obviously if you know yourself, you have a plan, you're more likely to be assured in being successful in a sales role. And the other piece to this is career decision-making requires individuals to have faith in their abilities. Those that can make the most rational decisions, individuals that are said to have high career decision-making self-efficacy, they tend to be more successful. So in other words, those that know how to research employer, know how to assess their fit with an employer are more likely to be successful. So a lot of research shows that students should engage in career intervention programs and courses to improve their career decision-making self-efficacy. And Laura and others mentioned that the Chally, we use the Chally a lot as well for a couple of different purposes. I actually have my students develop a self-leadership plan based on the results, because that's kind of my pet theory, I guess. So it was a two-stage study. The first study was qualitative, and we actually probably talked to some of your students. We interviewed 20 students or 20 recent graduates working in a sales career. They were in, they graduated between May 2018 and May 2020. Actually, no, this group was earlier. It was 17 to the end of 19, I believe. So this was a pre-COVID group. And all the students were kind of high achievers, I guess, in the sense that they had all competed in a national sales competition. And we'll talk about the breakdown in a little bit. And we did a series of depth interviews around these themes, basically starting with what was the best thing about your sales program in terms of how it prepared you, and what was the biggest gap. And then we took those findings and we sought to build a structural model based on some of the latent constructs that were developed, or themes that were developed through the qualitative research. So our goal in the phase 2 was to validate a latent model of early stage sales performance and intent to stay with recent graduates. And we ended up having 207 recent grads in the US and 37 different states complete about a 90-item questionnaire. You say, how did we do that? We offered a small incentive. And from that data we gathered, we're able to build a latent model, and then also to drill down a little deeper and do some post-tests and see what college programs were doing that led to those the constructs that we're interested in. We just submitted to the Journal of Personal Selling and Sales Management. The issue was the paper hadn't been reviewed. We probably had too much overlap in calling it a two-stage study because the first stage had already been published, and that's something we should have caught, and we'll be resubmitting in the next week, hopefully with some of your feedback. So phase 1, 20 recent grads, as I said. There were 17 in the US, 2 in Europe, 1 in Canada. All had competed in national sales competitions. You can get a glimpse of our sales lab there. This was pre-COVID, so this was a little more ambitious at the time. I was actually had my back to the, because I'm talking to our interviewee, who I purposely had taking a drink of water to maintain his confidentiality, but that's what it looked like. And I'm looking at him through a computer monitor, actually. Over 23 hours of interviews were transcribed and analyzed via in vivo, and we use Braun and Clark's framework to study and code the data. So this may be a little hard to read. In fact, I know it's hard to read, but we started out with generally what are the skills and abilities learned through your collegiate sales program that made you feel well prepared. What do you feel wasn't learned in your program? How did your collegiate sales program help you prepare to select an employer? How could it have prepared you better? Do you know what self-leadership is? And then we dive down into where the rubber meets the road here, I guess you might say. Specifically describe what happened when you first encountered a series of rejections or sales calls that weren't successful. And how did you deal with that? And that's really kind of the acid test of all these things that you've learned. Provide the best thing about your sales program, the recommendation for your sales program. Is there anything else we might have missed? So we found that the codes or that the codes naturally evolved into high preparedness and inadequate preparedness in 3 different categories. Good sales process knowledge, knowing how to handle objections, mirror the buyer, ask good questions. High career choice self-efficacy or career choice self-efficacy, active mentorship, training on that in terms of high and high sales related self-efficacy, things like self-leadership skills, self-knowledge, understanding how to deal with the ups and downs and being able to cope. And so those naturally grouped into high or inadequate. And in the interest of time, I was going to ask you which you thought was the most positive out of sales programs, but you can probably guess that it was the sales process knowledge. No question, hands down. That was overwhelmingly positive. The other two were somewhat positive, but much more mixed results. And you have to keep in mind that these were fairly elite sales students as well. So what do we do good? What do we do well? Good sales process knowledge, the whole playbook, active listening, mirroring and body language skills, objection handling, high career choice, self-efficacy. A lot of faculty were actively involved in mentoring students to ask good interview questions, select an employer, interview training, opportunities created to interact with employers, a big one, and high related sales related self-efficacy, very authentic experiential exercises to build assurance, emotional intelligence studied, high level of engagement, lots of industry interaction, internships, all authentic experiences, and also self-leadership training. So some excerpts of the good, structuring calls, doing trial closes, being able to dig deeper, ask that second, third, fourth, fifth level questions, things they were practicing and using every day, learning how to recognize different personality types, high career choice self-efficacy. Some institutions have extensive databases, a lot of experience with employers, interview training and asking good questions, lots of active mentoring, interview training again. And then sales competitions in terms of building self-efficacy. All these students had done sales competitions, so they were mentioned often. Just a realistic sales environment, particularly setting expectations, know what to expect, know that you're going to have that level of rejection. And self-knowledge, knowing what you're suited for, where you should be working. And a number of the schools did a pretty good job at that. Some of the inadequate factors focus in terms of sales process. There weren't a lot here, but the big one was focusing only on the face-to-face call and not the entire sales cycle. That was a big one. Concepts in terms of self-efficacy, the concepts learned not similar to employer training. And again, not enough self-knowledge, self-leadership, knowing myself, what I'm good at, what I should be doing. Not prepared for the level of rejection in sales. Always a big one, and that has to be stressed a lot. Inadequate preparation to choose a first employer. Again, this is where self-assessment tools, social styles, Chally come in. Some believe they would have liked a self-assessment tool, self-leadership training, particularly how to research employers and ask good interview questions. So inadequate sales process skills, there weren't many, but focus on the face-to-face, not the entire sale. And little focus on relationship building or account strategies. Again, inadequate career choice, self-efficacy. And if you'd like these slides, I think they'll make them available if you want to read all the excerpts. I mean, there's some great excerpts in here. I won't for the interest of time. But little training on asking good interview questions, how to research prospective employees, would have liked to complete a formal self-assessment tool. Inadequate sales-related self-efficacy, not prepared for the level of rejection in sales. If you look at the first quote, you really don't get a full understanding of how much rejection you're probably going to get at the beginning of your career. And you really have to have a certain level of tenacity in sales. I think a consensus from my cohorts is we weren't exactly prepared for cold calling. Because a lot of these students are going into CSR roles where they're going to be doing a lot of cold calling. So conclusions, the respondents felt quite positive about sales process skills, but mixed feelings about sales and career choice related self-efficacy and self-leadership skills. That shouldn't be surprising. The sales process skills are, it's probably a little more the nature of low-hanging fruit. We do a great job at it, but some of the other areas do appear to be important as well. Degree of sales and career choice related self-efficacy and self-leadership skills did appear to relate to the level of assurance and the likelihood to stay. The stronger the students were in that area, they kind of had the whole package, and they were like, felt they were doing well and were likely to stay. And a moderate number really felt they really could have been better prepared to choose an employer and cope with day-to-day ups and downs and cold calling roles. So phase two, essentially, we had a number of hypotheses. I reviewed the research already. Self-efficacy is going to be, or sales performance is going to be related to current sales performance, related positively to the level of self-efficacy upon graduation. All kinds of research would indicate that. Start out with strong self-efficacy and assurance, you're going to be more likely to endure and perform. And also that your current level of self-efficacy should be high. And it's been argued that this is a reciprocal relationship, that performance builds self-efficacy. It's kind of like the performance satisfaction continuum. A lot of debate about it. Sales-related self-efficacy upon graduation will vary positively with the perceived sales process knowledge at graduation. Sales process knowledge doesn't necessarily impact performance directly. We showed that in our 2014 paper as well. It impacts self-efficacy, which in turn impacts performance. Sales-related self-efficacy will vary positively with the current amount of perceived sales process knowledge. Again, that knowledge affects self-efficacy. Current sales performance will vary positively with career-related self-efficacy upon graduation. We could go back to the research that if you're more assured in choosing an employer, more confident, you're more likely to perform better. And if you perform better, intent to stay will vary positively with career-related self-efficacy. If you felt you made the right choice and you were skilled at it, you had a high level of skills, you're more likely to stay. And of course, if you're performing better, you're more likely to stay either on a voluntary or involuntary basis. And then we drilled down, after we built the Layton model, we wanted to look at concepts like performance and what we do that affects that. We believe that because of the need for self-efficacy, the more authentic and relevant the teaching methods are, including internships and sales competitions, that's going to drive current sales performance, that it's going to turn out higher performing, current performing early stage sales reps. Recent graduates in general will believe they're better prepared for sales process skills than personal life and territory management skills. And that's what we saw from the phase one. We wanted to validate it through a much larger sample. Career-related self-efficacy upon graduation will vary with the amount of career development and planning curriculum. So you're going to have obviously higher career-related self-efficacy if you experience that curriculum in your program. And the level of self-leadership skills are upon graduation is going to vary positively with the amount of curriculum on self-leadership concepts. So 11,000 students, or sample 11,000, we approached about 2,000 that fit the profile that we're looking for. We had 278 respondents who indicated their intent to complete. We had 203 usable responses, mean age of 24, similar to, unfortunately, our current makeup of salespeople. About 60% were male. Only 14% identified sales as their primary major, but 58% indicated that they graduated with some type of sales qualification, like a certificate. And about 3/4 had completed one sales course, 37 different states. I won't go too much into the methodology itself, but we followed the normal procedures. So here's what the model looked like. So what drives sales efficacy at graduation? Sales knowledge, as you expect, but also career-related self-efficacy, how confident I am in my career. Current self-efficacy, which drives current performance, current sales knowledge, what I've learned on the job. But interestingly, and this was a really interesting one, was self-leadership. So if you have those self-leadership skills, high-level self-leadership skills, self-knowledge, a plan at graduation, that was going to make you more self-assured a year or two in, because you were able to withstand those ups and downs and persist and all the wonderful things that high self-leadership skills purport to do. So current performance is impacted by self-efficacy at graduation. So the more self-efficacious, the more capable you feel at graduation, the greater the impact on your current performance. And as you'd also expect, your current sales self-efficacy. And your intention to stay, and again, this was interesting, your career-related self-efficacy at graduation, how strong you felt about your ability to choose an employer, or how positive you and how capable you felt, more accurately. That's going to impact your current intention to stay positively, because you feel confident, you felt confident about the choice of your employer, and intention to stay in current performance. Again, we've got kind of probably a circular relationship, just like we do with satisfaction and performance. So this is what the model looked like. Sales knowledge at graduation, which ultimately we're trying to develop, creates sales self-efficacy at graduation, which in turn leads to current sales performance. And career-related self-efficacy is all part of that mix, I guess. The more capable you feel to tackle a job, that's going to be determined to some degree by how capable you feel about choosing the right employer. So, and just some final points here about what we do and what impacts these important constructs. So sales knowledge, as you'd expect, the number more sales courses you take, the greater you believe your sales knowledge is. Participating in national competition, students believe they learn more and they gain more sales knowledge by competing. And of course, sales internships. But the self-efficacy piece, actually, we don't see sales competitions in there, but we do see experiential learning experiences. We had a whole menu of different types of experiential learning that occurs in classes. And career self-efficacy, the third component that we're interested in, this is governed by, how confident you are to a career assessment tool, an employer fit assessment tool, interview training, train to research the employer. And the final proposition here was that they were going to view process skills more positively that they gain through their sales programs than kind of personal or territory management skills. So I call prospecting management here, but you can see basically whether I've classified them or not, that you have to keep in mind that this was an early COVID sample who probably felt a little unprepared for web conference selling, but that's what they felt least prepared for. Territory management, sales forecasting and planning, and prospecting, not surprisingly. But all the good stuff that we teach them about active listening and clarification, things they use on the job, asking good questions, handling objections, we did a great job at that. So, summary discussion points. We should have career choice self-efficacy interventions. It should really, I believe, be included in all programs: mock interviews, skills inventory, self-assessments, career plans, self-leadership training, self-knowledge, developing a self-leadership plan, which they're going to use, hopefully, and something that is relevant and a tool that they believe they can use, is also a plus, I think, in terms of ensuring greater attention to stay and greater performance. Obviously, keep it real. Lots of experiential learning. It's powerful, particularly anything related to cold calling and the daily ups and downs. And the interesting finding here was that life, personal, and territory skill development may well be as important as sales process knowledge development. But the good news is that sales education, through all indications that we saw, does seem to develop salespeople who are better and they're more likely to stay. So references, if you're interested, and I'd be happy to forward the presentation to any of you that are interested if it's not posted in the materials. And that was a lot of information, and I hope it was valuable for you. And if you have any comments or questions, I'd really like to know what you thought about the general concepts from your own experience in your own program, and whether that information was helpful to you.
Look, Peter, first of all, thank you very much indeed, Peter. That was a great presentation. I mean, certainly from a UK perspective, the Great Resignation, as I think you described it, is something which we're also experiencing in the UK, and that kind of demographic change and skill shortages generally, which I think is also playing into the hands of the point about hiring young graduates to do real jobs. I think also is a reflection on the job that we've been doing, getting them fit for doing that career choice. I think is a reflection of that. I'll ask the floor here first. Any questions for Peter? Anybody? Yeah, Ivan, go ahead.
Hey, Peter. Great presentation. Thank you very much. The more than a question is the common and particular situation. I work for Morehouse College. As some of you know, it's an HBCU. And
Yep.
Dr. Wells, I don't know if you know Cassandra Wells,
Yep.
took the whole year sabbatical for research, trying to figure out why we don't have more African Americans in sales at this point. So she did almost exactly what you did. The research is very extensive, and there are two more professors that are helping her with the data and all these things. So your research gave me some ideas, and I appreciate that. One of the things I do, and been doing this since I started with Morehouse in 2013, is that the sales competitions, I put together 2 internal sales competitions, and I typically take students to 2 external sales competitions. Depending on the semester, it could be more. Depending on the sponsors, it could be more. But there's only one person that can do that, and it's me. And so at the end of this, and the one thing I tell the students, because there's a discussion here, that the competition should be elective and not mandatory. And to me, that's one of the discussions I always have with Cassandra, saying, no, it should be mandatory. If you're in sales and you're doing a sales minor or sales concentration, you should go to a sales competition. At least the 2 I put together for you internally, where you don't have to travel, miss classes, blah, 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 blah. And so finally, these things are mandatory for all the classes, meaning principles of sales, advanced sales, and CRM, and approximately customer experience. And so that's the one thing. Now, at the end of every year, we do something that we call the sales banquet, where we recognize the best students during the entire school year. And so we had one this semester, finally, because we canceled these things because of COVID for 2 years. And finally, we did it this semester, and I invited 3 students, one that graduated 6 years ago, another one 3 years ago, and another one just last year. One with Deloitte, one with Salesforce, and one with Oracle. And I was telling our colleague here from Idaho how impressive is the result of the sales training that we did for them, and how amazingly well they're doing in their sales career with these 3 magnificent companies. So you just gave me an idea to do another research.
Well, yeah, if it's helpful, we competitions, our program is relatively small. We have about 25 grads a year. It's large for us, but in the intro sales class, a competition is required. But in an advanced sales class that the sales certificate students take, we do a 4-stage sales competition where they have to do a cold call to qualify. They do a needs assessment call. They do a team. They do a team close and business commitment call. That's a much more complex call, usually given half an hour. And then they have to do a customer care and follow-up call. And they have the option, if they want to take a buy on 2 of those calls to do a national sales competition or to do rainmakers. So again, it goes along with learning styles, their preference, but that way we're assured that everybody competes. And our sponsors are kind enough to provide some nominal prizes. I mean, we get a little skin in the game. I mean, the winner gets, I think our top winner was Sales Student of the Year, and one was on the team that won the sales competition. I think she got $150 in gift cards and, you know, a bunch of swag and things I've gotten over the years at sales competitions and things some of our suppliers threw in. But it's more that, you know, the achievement of winning it and being able to put that on your resume. And we do a LinkedIn story. We have our own private LinkedIn page. So yeah, I think competition is important because every sales organization has some type of competition, and you have to replicate that.
Okay, Howard, go ahead.
Hey, Peter, Howard Dover, how you doing?
Hi, Howard. How are you?
Good. Just a question from a selection bias. You're a little bit. The presumption is that the sales competition is preparing the students for the jobs of today, and so when you interview, it's a little maybe not surprising that you would find what you're finding, because the jobs of today are not meeting based; they're usually prospecting based. And
Yep.
So just, friend to friend, obviously in the review process, I'd be shocked if you don't hear people saying you maybe have a selection bias, that you went after just 17 universities and only students who competed. So just a thought.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thanks for the thought, Howard. Don't tell the journal that we published don't raise that issue because it's already published, the qualitative study. The quant study had 207 grads that had varying levels of sales education, including 25% that hadn't taken a sales course. So the selection bias, these were students, all they had to do was graduate a four-year college and be working in sales. So they weren't necessarily the sales competition students. I think if I remember the data, about 12% had been in a sales competition, national sales competition.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter, thank you. Enjoyed the presentation. Suresh Sundaram, University of Delaware. I know you talked to students that had competed in competitions, but did you take the opportunity or think about following up with actually talking to the employers that had employed these students and figuring out what their perceptions were, kind of looking at a congruence? Is there?
Yeah, and that would be an interesting line of research, definitely. The reason we didn't do that is a few of those studies have been done. I think that there probably have been other studies similar to ours that examine the perceptions of students. That would be ideal to triangulate that. But I know there are other papers that have done that. And again, we get into the confidentiality issue and having to sign waivers, and it would be a great project. Definitely. I think it'd be very insightful. What do students' perceptions, how do they relate to what the employer actually thinks? But we wanted to add a little more to the discussion on what actually happens when students get out and what they think.
I mean, I've got one, Peter. I mean, one of the things that, just touching on Dawn's leadership plan, I've done a little bit of work on psychometrics, looking at behavioral characteristics. I did some research a few years ago on, I looked at entrepreneurs and looked at their propensity in terms of how they went about raising finance. And do you think it's one of those things which, looking at some of the results of your research, whether in terms of Dawn's, the comments about the self-leadership plan, whether we should do more on analysing students' propensity to have certain competencies and skills and attributes and traits even, before they pursue this kind of career, because they might suddenly discover, it's not for them.
Well, I feel one of the most valuable roles that we play in my intro sales class is weeding out the students that are probably won't be suited for sales. And they feel fortunate in that regard as well. we know that about 60 to 70% of marketing majors will find their first career position in sales. And they're probably, 50% of marketing majors probably aren't suited for a career in sales. Hopefully it's not that high. So, that's one service we provide, but I think that, that looking at it from a more positive standpoint is which we want to do it as salespeople, being able to develop and uncover and reveal those hidden capabilities within students. And I've had a number of students who just evolved through the program that were shy. They thought, they had those preconceptions of sales that, this is not for me. And by the end of the program, obviously, because I'm bringing up the example, they were very engaged with the sales career. And a number of them, I follow them on LinkedIn. We have a private group. A number of them have done quite well. So I think it's very important. Engagement obviously is important. But I think that comes from self-knowledge and discovering however you can the strengths that you have in you. And that's why I think that tools like the Tally assessment are very powerful and have a lot of uses in our classrooms.
Okay, look, time's pushing, so I need to just kind of draw it to a close. But any more questions from our online colleagues? Any other questions for Peter? So Mark's asking the question, Peter, in your conclusion on your last slide, you said seems to indicate. Were the results not strong enough to say it does indicate?
That's that, yeah. That I think for phase 2, we'll leave that up to the reviewers. But you certainly the structural model did indicate that some of those relationships have been well proven in the past, and we just looked at it in a different way. But I think it's fair to say that I shouldn't have said seems.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Peter. Guys, round of applause for Peter. Great job, Peter. Thank you very much for your presentation. So look,
any of you that aren't connected with me on LinkedIn, please do.
Yeah. Okay. And also, I think we've got a WhatsApp group which I think we've just launched, haven't we? Which is in the chat box. So everyone's got an email with the. If you're predisposed to go and use WhatsApp, we have a connection which I think we've just emailed everybody.
Absolutely, and I would very much appreciate the feedback and prompt feedback because we're probably going to resubmit in a week or so.
Okay.